Hello, today we'll be talking about what's making sense today, based on the reflection that's been happening regarding the situation at hand, where the system has been failing us, and then we understand why there's been targeting citizen and corruption been really happening in our society right now. So we've observing like modification of military record of my DD-214, why there is like unauthorized or unexplained modification of personal military records, such as on my DD-214. That raises another red flags. Is it lawful for such changes without, the service members' consents or modification? Do people have the right to modify the starting date of the military service for citizen? And if that's the case, why are they doing that? Because that shouldn't be the case. And furthermore, it raises serious concern, around legal integrity and veterans' rights and transparency, because nobody should have the right to modify anybody's record, let alone veterans who serve honorably in the military service. So how do we navigate the system? So based on that situation, we're observing also a shadow banning of job seekers, me included, where there's like a digital suppression when people have been digitally like suppressed when applying for jobs, application being disappearing or no callbacks just because it's another form of tactics to just suppress and oppress the truth speaker, because what they're doing basically is actually against the law. That leads me to even further freedom questions. Is America the land of the free, or where the opportunity have been filtered in the shadows? Because how come somebody who has two bachelor's degree, a master degree in STEM will actually even apply to jobs that don't require any certification, but no successful outcome? So that leads me to even further red flag and questioning: is the system really like for the people, or is just for those people in higher position? And then also, in another form of tactics, we have like civilian surveillance, where there's been monitoring as if like people were guilty of something until they are proven innocent. So there's basically like spying scenario happening where they send basically a paycheck, and then they actually, once the paycheck is actually like deposited in the account, so they request like a receipt to basically like just see how much is the account, to basically gauge how longer the abuse will continue. Because when they actually stop every financial access, so they're basically like, the goal is basically like to see citizen like just behaving like negatively, so that they can actually act accordingly. So which hasn't been the case so far. So they're basically just extending the court's legal approach, so that they can actually manipulate even further. And then again, that same surveillance is observed in programs and behavior profiling, undermining like the privacy and civil liberty, which is actually wrong and should be immediately stopped. In the same train of thought, we have like cyber threats and data integrity violation, where we observe like data breach, linked to the modification of military record, which is unauthorized access to personal records, and also ethical violation, So when they basically talk about like having integrity, so if leaders are able to like modify like military members' records, they're not actually showing integrity. So that should be actually uh, stopped as well because nobody is above the law here. And the workplace manipulation as well as gaslighting. So the same pattern continues when basically people are subdued and pushed out of job under the pretense being not of being unfit, when it's in reality another tactics for them to basically like push people out of the job so that whenever they apply, they will be like, okay, the person didn't actually last long in a job, so they're not fit for having a career or a job, which is another tactic that's been observed. And again, the toxicity in the work environment to basically, justify the abuse that's being actually implemented, which shouldn't be lawful and acceptable. And then in the same similar fashion, the chaos has been manufacturing as well as narrative control, where the intention is basically to create social or professional disorder and label individual who's myself as unstable. They weaponize basically like mental health to discredit the truth teller because it goes basically against the principle that's put on paper, but in reality it doesn't reflect that. And then also they're basically like doing a study on the subject who's me basically at this point. They have like covert behavior assessment without consent, targeting citizen as intellectual inferior, unfit, perceived like manipulation. Does that really like align with democratic values? If that's the case, somebody tell me, because up to now I don't see any correlation with the manipulation tactics that they have been implemented to the democratic like value that they portray basically. So which shouldn't be the case here. And then again, in the same similar fashion, we observing also a systematic corruption, and where the legal system has been corrupted, and they work in cahoots, basically where institutions using like convoluted processes to justify misappropriation of funds, where they actually seize property unjustly, and also by ignoring problems, real community problems, ignore while fundings, into irrelevant agendas, and having even like covert operations where taxpayers basically like spend the money for illegal operation. They usually say charity start at home, but to my observation, basically billions of foreign wars has been conducted to support citizen of other country, when in reality in the same in the United States there's people homeless, jobless. Are we really in a democratic like system? Because if you don't take care of your home, how do you actually expect to take care of somebody else? Which doesn't make sense to me at this point. So how can a world how can you lead the world when people purposely goes against the law of their own country, but trying to like show leadership to others, and then conducting like covert agendas like operation just to justify some corruption, and then to actually oppress a truth speaker. So this is the reason why I'm fighting against the justice system, and then we need answers to those manipulation and corruption tactics. Thank you.